recording, and then I will share screen.
Mm.
And hang on a sec, let me close a bunch of stuff. And hang on a sec, let me put this. Okay. Good. Okie doke. And desktop. Here we go. Okie doke. So can you tell me the story so far? What has happened in The Enemy by Pearl S. Buck?
Uh, There is a man who is sergeant,
Mm-hmm.
doctor,
Mm-hmm.
and his friend.
His friend?
His, his friend Hannah.
Ah, not friend. Wife.
A wife.
Wife, wife. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Wife Hannah. They found a American guy
Mm-hmm.
in the sea, and they helped him,
Yeah.
and uh, and they washed him. That's all.
Okay. That's a really good description. I don't think they actually found him in the sea. They found him flung from the sea. It was kind of like he was thrown from the sea. It was kind of a very special image of looked like the sea, a giant wave from the sea threw the man onto the land, and he kind of landed on his feet. It was almost something from The Little Mermaid or something, very kind of startling, surprising thing to see. Yeah, but very good description. And they're having a lot of uh, reservations. Like reservation sometimes means like yoyaku, like I reserve a table in a restaurant. But reservations can also mean um, a feeling of doubt about something. Like maybe you uh, always thought you wanted to go to America for study abroad, but you realize that the coronavirus is really bad these days. So you might say, oh, I'm having some reservations about it. Let me see. Oh, that's weightlifting things. Sorry. If I build a house, I want to make my own gym. So I'm looking online, but definition. Okie doke. Yeah. So the action of reserving something, that's not right.
To have.
No, no. There's also reservation that means a place in America where Native American people live. The government gave them land after they took land away. So those are three definitions: a reservation at a restaurant, reservation for Native American people, and a feeling of doubt or questioning. Let me see if I can find a better definition of reservation to show you. The act of reserving something. Like, yes, this definition here. Uh, uh, B, anyways, doubt or misgiving. Feeling of doubt, and misgiving means uh, also means doubt. It means a feeling of uncomfortableness with something. You could say, I'm having misgivings about this decision. Yeah, misgiving. Yeah, let's see what they say about misgiving if we click on that. A feeling of doubt or suspicion, especially concerning a future event. Misgiving. Misgiving, you know. So you meet someone and they seem like a nice person and they seem friendly, but then you realize they're telling lies to you or they're telling you some things that don't seem quite right. You might say, I'm having some misgivings about John. I feel like maybe he's not an honest person. Yeah. So, okay. Yeah, so they were having a feeling of reservation. Like the doctor wants to help all people. And in the past, he met some nice Americans who helped him a lot when he was studying abroad. He did more than just study abroad. He went to medical school in America. So he was there for a long time and studied in a very serious way. But now America is the enemy, and he really feels that he should uh, not help this man. So he's having reservations about that. But he's also having reservations about not helping the man, like both ways. He feels like he has competing duties, and his wife also is having um, different feelings. Like who should she be loyal to? She's most loyal to her husband. She loves her husband Sadao very much, and wants to support him. Yeah, but she also loves Japan, and she wants to do what's right for Japan. But at the same time, she heard some rumors that Japanese soldiers were not treating American prisoners well. And when she sees some scars, some marks on the soldier's throat, and notices how thin he is and how sick he is, she's also having reservations about giving him to the Japanese army. Maybe the Japanese army will kill him or do something terrible to him. So,
Oh.
yeah. So it's lots of misgivings, lots of doubts, and lots of moral questions. So in our program, The Good Place, this is a perfect question for Chidi. Chidi
Mm-hmm.
would write on his whiteboard, what should they do? Did you finish the first season of The Good Place yet?
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
Okay, so next time, let's talk about The Bad Place.
Okay.
They're not in the good place, they're in the bad place. Were you fooled? Did you guess before they told you?
What?
Were you surprised when you
Uh,
saw the ending?
I was so surprised.
Yeah, right? And then Michael, whose face was charming
Mm.
and handsome, looked evil. Like he's
Yeah.
a very good actor. His laughter, which before was nice, looked
Mm.
evil. And in future episodes, you can, in season 2, I think, you can learn, like you see some things that he did and oh, he's smiling, but it's an evil smile. And if you rewatch everything, you realize that when he's being friendly, it's kind of suspicious. Like if you
Uh,
watch now, you'll have misgivings at everything he says and does.
mm,
Yeah, it's fun in that way. But anyways, misgivings, reservations, doubts. Okay,
reservation.
reservations. Okay, so I'll read some, and as always, if you just say, "Hey, Dave," we can stop at any point.
Okay.
Okay, so I think we finished here, where he said, "My friend," he always called his patients, and so now he did, forgetting that this was his enemy. So we start from here, I think. Then quickly, with the cleanest and most precise of incisions, the bullet was out. The man quivered, but he was still unconscious. Nevertheless, he muttered a few English words. So incision is a cut, especially a very clean cut done by a surgeon, not
Mm,
a very skillful cut. And to
mm,
quiver is to have your body shiver. Um, and it's a movement of the body, maybe because of pain, uh, or it could be cold. Yeah. Or it could be because of motion. Like if you have you ever done archery?
Archery.
Archery, kudo. Yeah. So when you shoot the arrow, when it hits the target, it will kind of quiver. We'll use the word, yeah, quiver. Yeah, and actually let me check really quick. Quiver.
Mm,
Yeah, so it's interesting.
mm,
This device for holding arrows is also called a quiver. I don't know
what?
if it's related to the motion of quiver, but if you watch Avengers, there's a character called Hawkeye who's the world's best archer, um, and yeah, he always has a quiver to pull out arrows. Yeah, um, so you can think of it. Remember it for two things for archery: an arrow will quiver, it will shake when it hits something, and it's also what you put arrows in.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so the man muttered some words, even though he was unconscious. Guts, he muttered, choking. They got my guts. So guts are your stomach, the things in your stomach. Yeah, yeah. If someone is boxing, they might get punched in the gut, which means onaka. Yeah. But in an action movie, if someone gets shot, they could say, "Oh, their guts are coming out." Yeah. But we also use gut sometimes to mean intuition or feeling about something. Like if you're having misgivings about something, if you're having doubts about something, you might say, "I have a bad feeling in my gut." Like if it's a horror movie
I
and
have
a
bad
bunch of people are
feeling
in a.
in my.
Hmm? Sorry,
Oh,
did you say something?
ne- network internet.
Network. Maybe network quivered. Yeah.
Pivot.
But sometimes guts means intuition or like a feeling you cannot explain. Not in this case, but it can mean, it can be related to intuition. Like we say, a feeling in my gut. Like you feel, like we had the idiom butterflies in your stomach. That means nervousness. But like a feeling in your gut, I have a bad feeling in my gut about this. If it's like a horror movie and it's in a haunted house, right? And maybe all of the college students are having a party and everyone seems happy, but then there's one student who is having misgivings. I feel like there's something evil here, like a ghost or a monster. And someone says, "What are you talking about?" I say, "I just have a feeling in my gut. Something is wrong." Yeah. Yeah, it's a good expression. Like you might use it in a war movie. If there was in World War II, like this story is set. Maybe there are some Japanese soldiers, and one of the Japanese soldiers is feeling that maybe there are some Americans or Russians nearby. They haven't seen them yet, but they have a sense. They might say, "I have a feeling in my gut. Something is wrong.
I
Something."
have a feeling my gut.
Yeah. But in this case, he just means the insides of his onaka or his stomach. Okay, guts, he muttered, choking. They got my guts. Sadao, Hana cried sharply. Hush, Sadao
Hush.
said.
What the
Hush is
hush?
Shizukani. Or it's
Oh,
like saying shh. Yeah,
oh,
yeah.
oh.
It could be rude nowadays. This story is more than 50 years old, I think. If like adults will say to children, especially strict adults will say to children, but now in 2020, maybe if a husband says hush to his wife, it might be considered sexist, considered kind of not good. But in this time, um, maybe people wouldn't think so or say anything. He doesn't mean to be rude, but he's just telling her she must be quiet. The man sank. The man sank again into silence, so profound that Sadao took up his wrist, hating the touch of it. What was she looking for? I told you last time she took up his wrist. What is she looking for?
Pause.
Pulse, pulse. Yeah, she's looking for a pulse. But again, she has very strong misgivings about any white person, any American person. So she takes it up immediately because she wants to make sure he's alive. But at the same time, she's hating the touch of it. Like, kimochi warui. It's, yeah. Yes, there was still a pulse, so faint, so feeble. Feeble means very weak, very weak. If someone has a problem with their brain, and we might sometimes call them feeble-minded. It sounds very harsh, and someone might use it as an insult. Like if someone hates Trump, they might say he's feeble-minded. It can be an insult, but it means weak. Yeah. But the pulse was so faint and weak, but enough. He wanted the man to live, to give hope. But certainly, I do not want this man to live, he thought. So he wanted him to live, to give hope, but then he told himself consciously, I don't want him to live. Um, no more anesthetic, he told Hannah. He turned as swiftly as though he had never paused, and from his medicines he chose a small vial, and from it filled a hypodermic and thrust it into the patient's left arm. So vial is a small glass container, especially holding drugs, or in Harry Potter, maybe magic potions. Yeah, it's
Oh.
usually used in science. Yeah. And from it, a hypodermic needle is for injection, kind of injection, a needle for injection. Yeah,
So.
yeah. And thrust it into the patient's arm. Then putting down the needle, he took the man's wrist again. The pulse under his fingers fluttered once or twice and then grew stronger. So flutter has kind of a similar meaning to quiver, but we use flutter more for like butterflies or pulses. Yeah, we say a butterfly's wings, flutter, flutter. Yeah, flutter. You could say someone's heart is fluttering. You know, if it's a romantic story and the two people in love meet, they could say that their hearts are fluttering. And there's an even older version of the word aflutter. Their hearts are aflutter, meaning kind of going really quickly. So similar meaning to quiver and flutter, but even words that are similar, we often use them in different cases. That's kind of why it's dangerous when language learners are using a thesaurus or dictionary to always find different words, because the nuance can be very different and it will sound very strange. So over time, you'll get better and better at choosing good words, but just using a thesaurus. Do you know thesaurus? Thesaurus.
I don't know.
Thesaurus is a special book, kind of related to dictionary, but it will tell you words with similar meanings, synonyms. Synonyms. So if you type in flutter, yeah, drift, flicker, flit, flop, hover, quiver, shiver, throb, tremble, vibrate, wiggle, wobble. But you cannot just use them. So you can't really say, you can say the man's pulse was fluttering, but you cannot really say the man's pulse was vibrating. Vibrate, the nuance is usually more with machines. That's why your iPhone has a vibrate mode. Yeah, things like that. But yeah, thesaurus is very useful kind of book, but you have to use it cautiously. Maybe at first ask international students or ask me or ask someone else, is this a good word to use? Yeah, because some of them will sound very strange. His pulse is ruffling, is quite peculiar. His pulse is wiggling, sounds funny, sounds very, very wrong. But these are all considered synonyms, words with similar meanings. So we shouldn't think of synonyms as exact meaning, because all words have slight variation of nuance from other words. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. But it's useful to know and to practice with. Okay, so it fluttered once or twice, then grew stronger. This man will live in spite of all, he said to Hana and sighed. The young man woke, so weak, his blue eyes so terrified when he perceived where he was, that Hana felt compelled to apologize. So a moment ago, she thought, oh, it's disgusting holding his hands. Like kimochi warui, I'm touching a white man. But then when she sees the man's eyes and he's so afraid of her, he sees a Japanese face and he sees another Japanese face and he's so terrified. Her first feeling is to say, gomen nasai, I'm so sorry. Like her first feeling, her compulsion, she's compelled to apologize. Compel, you kind of feel the need, you must. Not even should, compelled. Yeah, some people, sometimes you'll hear a very heroic story. Maybe there's a fire and there's a baby in the building. And the firemen say, don't go in. But some man or woman runs in without thinking and grabs the baby and is a great hero. And later the newscaster say, why did you do that? Everyone was so afraid. And they say, I was compelled to do it. I just felt I must do it. Yeah. So she was compelled to apologize. Do you know, like some people wash their hands a lot, like 100 times a day or 1,000 times a day or 10,000. Yeah, there's a kind of psychological issue called obsessive compulsive disorder, OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. So, a disorder in which a person feels the need to perform certain routines repeatedly, called compulsions, or has certain thoughts repeatedly, called obsessions. The condition is associated with tics, anxiety disorder, yeah, and increased risk of suicide. I didn't know the last one, but which is quite scary. But if we go here, let me see. In Japan, it must be known. English to Japanese. Do you know?
強迫性障害。
No.
Yeah,
You don't know. First time you've heard of it.
yeah. First time.
In America, it's very famous. It's very, very famous. Nowadays, people won't shake hands. You know, they'll bow. Or did you see people touch elbows?
No.
Oh, now it's kind of common in America to say hello because of coronavirus. People will just touch their elbow. Yeah, yeah. But there are some famous people. There's a famous American comedian who he wears gloves all the time, I think. And even with gloves, he won't shake hands. He's really afraid of germs and things like that. So it's a very difficult condition for people to have. But compulsion is the need to do it. So, and obsessive is with the thoughts. Sometimes it's interesting things like turning light switch on. Like some people, for some reason, they think they must turn a light switch on and off 10 times every time they go into a room, or 100 times. Yeah. So it is sometimes very difficult for people to live their lives because it takes them so long to get ready because they have many rituals they do. But she was compelled to apologize. All of us feel compelled at some point. If someone does something very rude, you might say you were compelled to say something. You were compelled to talk, you know. Okay. She herself served him, for none of the servants would enter the room. When she came in the first time, she saw him summon his small strength to be prepared for some fearful thing. Don't be afraid, she begged him softly. How come you speak English? He gasped. He's very weak. Gasp is a kind of breath. Like sometimes we say someone cried, like, shut up, you know. But you could also gasp. If someone is coming out of the water and they were drowning, they might be, help me, you know. That would be considered a gasp. It doesn't always have to be a word. It can just be sound. But he said, how come you speak English? You know, because he has so little strength. Because he was wounded and he lost blood and he was thrown into the ocean and he was cut by rocks. Then he was cut by Sadao to remove the bullet. And for so many reasons, he is so tired and weak. I was a long time in America, she replied. She saw that he wanted to reply to that, but he could not. And so she knelt and fed him gently with the porcelain spoon. He ate unwillingly, but he ate. Maybe he's afraid of poison. He thinks something, he doesn't trust her. She saw that okay, well, I did that, sorry. Yeah. Now you will soon be strong, she said, not liking him, and yet moved to comfort him. So in this case, moved has a very similar meaning to compelled. Compelled. Strong feeling that she must do something. He did not answer. When Sadao came in the third day after the operation, he found the young man sitting up, his face bloodless with the effort. Lie down, Sadao cried. Do you want to die? He forced the man down gently and strongly and examined the wound. You may kill yourself if you do this sort of thing, he scolded. What are you going to do with me? The boy muttered. He looked just now barely 17. Are you going to hand me over? For a moment, Sadao did not answer. He finished his examination and then pulled the silk quilt over the man. I do not know myself what I shall do with you, he said. I ought, of course, to give you to the police. You are a prisoner of war. No, do not tell me anything. He put up his hand as he saw the man was about to speak. So the man was about to say something. He said, you are a prisoner of the war. And the man was about to say something. And he said, no, do not speak. He doesn't want to know about any of the things. Do not even tell me your name unless I ask it. They looked at each other for a moment, and then the young man closed his eyes and turned his face to the wall. Okay, he whispered, his mouth a bitter line. So he's very unhappy, the man. So his mouth he's not smiling at all. It's just a straight line. Outside the door, Hana was waiting for Sadao. He saw at once that she was in trouble. Sadao, Yumi tells me the servants feel they cannot stay if we hide this man here anymore. She said, she tells me that they are saying that you and I were so long in America that we have forgotten to think of our own country first. They think we like Americans. So earlier on, Hana was afraid of Yumi, even though Yumi was the servant. And now you can tell she's still afraid. The servants don't trust them. They came back from America, and the servants know they lived in America. So, the servants are saying that they like Americans, so they will protect the man and not turn him over to the Japanese authorities. It is not true, Sadao said harshly. Americans are our enemies, but I have been trained not to let a man die if I can help it. The servants cannot understand that, she said anxiously. No, he agreed. Neither seemed able to say more, and somehow the household dragged on. The servants grew more watchful, so they're kind of maybe spying on Sadao and Hana, seeing what will they do. Are they only going to protect the American? Do they like Americans? So servants, usually the owner of the house is above servants, but in stories like this, you can realize that in such cases, the servants have power. If they go to the police or they go to the army, Sadao and Hana could go to prison. Bad things could happen to them. So they're kind of afraid. So it's a kind of interesting social flip. You know, maybe the one who's on the top now feels like they're on the bottom. If you watch the movie Parasite, if you watch that, there's also some social flipping where who is in charge, who has the power, who doesn't have the power. In that movie, it's more secret. I won't spoil for you, but in this case, the powerful people clearly see that they have lost the power.
Did you watch?
I did. I did. Yeah. I have the English version, not English speaking, not the dubbed version, but I have English subtitles. So if you want to try to watch in Korean with English subtitles, I can put you in a room, and we should still not watch together, but if you want, if you come back to ICLA for something, I can lend you my computer and you can watch it. Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. But it might make you sad. It's a very good movie, but like this story might make us sad. Both of us because we are human beings, but also you as Japanese and me as American. It might make us both sad, the story we are reading. Parasite kind of might make you sad too, because it really looks at society. It's Korean society, but things from that movie also apply to rich and poor in Japan, I think, and rich and poor in America. It's just kind of in the world, the people with power and the people without power. But it's very interesting. My wife wanted to watch it again. My first thought was, it's very good, but I'm okay.
Sad.
It's sad. Yeah. Yeah. Did you watch Knives Out with me?
Yeah.
Okay, so I like that movie. I've already watched it 2 times, and I want to watch it again with my wife because I think it's very interesting, and and also at the ending, it makes you think, but it doesn't make you very, very sad. It kind of makes you, and you really want to know what will happen next.
Yeah.
Okay, let's continue. We're now on what page are we on? We are on page 14 of 24, so 10 more pages. The servants grew more watchful. Their courtesy was as careful as ever, but their eyes were cold upon the pair to whom they were hired. It is clear what our master ought to do, the old gardener said one morning. He had worked with flowers all his life and had been a specialist, too, in moss. For Sadao's father, he had made one of the fittest moss gardeners in Japan. Finest, sorry, not fittest. Fittest would kind of work too, but I read it incorrectly. Finest.
Finest.
Yep. sweeping the bright green carpet constantly so that not a leaf or a pine needle marred the velvet of its surface. Mar means to make an ugly mark on something, an ugly mark. So if someone does something really bad at school, gets a very bad grade, or has very bad behavior, you might say it mars your record, mars your record. Or if you have a perfectly painted wall and a car backs into it, hits it, and marks it, we could say it mars. So the gardener has been the gardener for the family for a long time. He was Sadao's father's gardener, and now he is Sadao's gardener, and he made a very beautiful moss garden. Yeah, unmarred. So it was not. So it was not a leaf or pine needle marred the velvet. So there were no imperfections. It was so beautiful. Yeah. My old master's son knows very well what he ought to do, he now said, pinching a bud from a bush as he spoke. When the man was so near death, why did he not let him bleed? So he thinks he should have let the man just die. He should not have removed the bullet. He should not have given him food, just let him die. He thinks that would be the patriotic thing to do, the thing that supported Japan. Yeah. So he's disappointed or unhappy with what the young master of the house did, Sadao. That young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life, the cook said contemptuously.
Contemptuously.
Contemptuously. Yeah, contemptuously is a very negative feeling. The act of despising the state of mind of one who despises. Lack of respect or reverence of something. So she doesn't respect the master of the house anymore. She has contempt for his action of saving the man, contemptuously. Let's see what Google Translate will give us. Well,
Can I bring battery?
yes, of course you can. This is the same drama? Is it the last episode? Can you watch it easily without sound? Cool. I like this little montage of the children. Looks like she's doing kung fu or something, but what is she doing? Oh, just getting ready to put it. My wife and I are watching it. Well, my wife is watching a Korean drama on Netflix. Is contemptuously hitatsura? That sounds right? Hitatsura.
Hitasura.
Hitasura. Sounds right? Contemptuously.
Contemptuously.
Contempt. Contemptuously.
Contempt.
Yeah. Don't pay so much attention to this T. Kind of ignore this T. Contemptuously.
Contemptuously. Contemptuously.
Contemptuously. Yeah. So does that make sense to you?
ひたすら。
ひたすら。
Hitasura. So that's the adverb. And then, whoops, contempt. Whoops. Why does that change? Something strange. Contempt. What? Why is it? Somehow it's crazy. Contempt. Well, it's trying to translate it automatically somehow. So this worked, right? Contemptuous. Nope. Why is hitasura okay? The contemptuous is really confusing to it. Tech language. Okay. English, Japanese. I don't know why, but maybe down here.
ルート implied and
These might get the gist, maybe kind of the basic meaning.
Okay.
Yeah, we say the main point or part, the essence, the gist of something, the basic meaning. So let's see that.
容姿、
びっくりした。
容姿、
Yoshi. So the gist, maybe that's the gist of it in Japanese, but okay. The cook said contemptuous. The young master is so proud of his skill to save life that he saves any life. So she says it in kind of a very disrespectful way. The cook said contemptuously. She split a fowl's neck skillfully and held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wisteria vine. So a wisteria is a kind of vine. I don't. My sister is actually a gardener, so she would know wisteria much better than me. But something like this, but the vine of it. And so this cook just killed a chicken really ruthlessly. So she said, "Oh, he'll save any life." And at that very moment, she takes a life. She kills a chicken, and the blood runs. Okay. She split a fowl's neck skillfully. Remember, fowl is a bird like a chicken that we collect the eggs from. And held the fluttering bird and let its blood flow into the roots of a wisteria vine. Blood is the best of fertilizers, and the old gardener would not let her waste a drop of it. So it's kind of like she kills the fowl, the chicken cruelly, and then the gardener wants her not to waste the blood, put the blood on the roots as fertilizer. But both of these actions seem very cruel and careless of life. So I think this is really important to this piece as art. It's showing that the two main characters, Sadao and Hana, are trying to save a life, giving a lot of effort, even though it's hard for them. But this older gardener and the cook are kind of taking life. Of course, cooks will always, take a chicken's life, and a gardener may always use blood to fertilize. Fertilize means to make fertile, to make grow well. So, for the grape fields, people sometimes use natural fertilizer or they use chemicals, and it makes the grapes grow better. But what they're doing, is kind of natural on a farm, but with their conversation and with the contemptuous way the woman talks and the kind of cruel way the man talks, it kind of seems to make them seem kind of heartless. He's pinching a bud. So a bud is growing life on a bush, right? A bud is a little piece that will maybe grow into a flower, but he pinches it, maybe taking it off. So he's doing gardening, but the gardening and cook's preparation in this context seems kind of cruel. And their discussion about the American soldier also seems cruel. Okay. It is the children of whom we must think, Yumi said sadly. What will be their fate if their father is condemned as a traitor? So not only might he go to jail, he might be killed. So Sadawa is saving a life, but he's also risking his life. Because to be a traitor in many countries, including America and Japan, you can get punished by death. If you do a crime betraying your country, like if you spy for a different country, or if you help an enemy of the country, you might be killed. So Yumi, at least, is thinking of the children. She's thinking, if Sadao is killed, what will happen to the children? They did not try to hide what they said from the ears of Hana as she stood arranging the day's flowers in the veranda nearby. And she knew they spoke on purpose that she might hear. That they were right, she knew too, in most of her being. But there was another part of her which she herself could not understand. It was not sentimental liking of the prisoner. She had come to think of him as a prisoner. She had not liked him even yesterday when he had said his name, he said in his impulsive way, "Anyway, let me tell you that my name is Tom." She had only bowed her little distant bow. She saw hurt in his eyes, but she did not wish to assuage it. Assuage means to make it less. Like if someone has a feeling of hurt and you want to assuage it, you say like, there. But so she sees the hurt in his eyes. He wants to share, he wants to connect with them, but still, in a way, she's feeling cruel. A large part of her thinks that the gardener and the cook and Yumi are right, but a small part of her thinks she should help the man. But still, she's very conflicted. Conflict is two different forces fighting each other. So inside, she's feeling very strong conflict. Indeed, he was a great trouble in this house. As for Sadao, every day he examined the wound carefully. The last stitches had been pulled out this morning, and the young man would, in a fortnight. Fortnight is a really interesting word. It's the name of a very popular video game. So if you search for Fortnite, you'll have millions of hits about a video game. The word itself means period of 2 weeks. Period of 2 weeks. And in America, it's very old-fashioned. But in Britain, I think people still say it. Like you might say, if you're leaving to go to America in 2 weeks, someone might say, I'm going in a fortnight. It is a period of 2 weeks. Just like a month is a period of 4 weeks, and a decade is a period of 10 years. A century is a period of 100 years. So he would be, sorry?
Fortnite.
Fortnight, yeah. It's a very useful word. A little bit old-fashioned, but yeah. So the young man in a fortnight would be nearly as well as ever. So they have really helped him get well. And we have an expression, to nurse back to health. In this case, nurse is not a noun, it's a verb, to nurse. Yeah, but to nurse back to health. So they think he's almost to full health, like not just as strong as when he came. He didn't just, he's maybe back to normal. They've really worked hard, even with their reservations, even with their misgivings, even with their doubts and their feeling that they're doing something bad because they're not doing what the Japanese government or the Japanese military or their servants think they should. Sadao went back to his office and carefully typed a letter to the chief of police reporting the whole matter. On the 21st day of February, an escaped prisoner was washed up on the shore in front of my house. So far, he typed, and then he opened a secret drawer of his desk and put the unfinished report into it. So interesting. He typed like one sentence of a report, and then he took the paper and he put it in a drawer. He didn't finish the report to the police. Yeah, this is a letter he wants to send. He feels, part of him feels he should send to the police. Yeah, so the man will be taken away. On the 7th day after that, 2 things happened. In the morning, the servants left together, their belongings tied in large square cotton kerchiefs. When Hana got up in the morning, nothing was done. The house was not cleaned and the food not prepared, and she knew what it meant. She was dismayed. It means kind of like hopelessly sad, like you don't know what to do. Yeah. And even terrified. Is it just sad? Let me make sure I give you the best possible definition here. Yeah, so it's more of alarm, experiencing or showing feelings of alarmed concern, upset, worried, or agitated because of some unwelcome situation or occurrence. And if we go to thesaurus. Aggrieved, agitated, bothered. Yeah, so it's more about being bothered than being sad. Yeah. Synonyms. Yeah.
Dismayed.
And there's another word. Yeah, overwhelming fear or worry. Distraught.
Distraught.
Yeah, dismayed and distraught.
Mm,
But both of them can be connected to sadness as well. Yeah, especially distraught, I think. I'm surprised sad. It's like kind of inconsolably sad sometimes, so concerned, frantic, or hysterical. So it's kind of an emotional state that sometimes can go together with sadness. But it'd be better in uh, uh, in this case to say that dismayed or distraught is so concerned, almost hysterical. Do you know hysterical?
um, hysteric.
Yeah. Can't control your emotions in a way.
Mm,
Yeah. Okay. And terrified, so frightened. But her pride as mistress would not allow her to show it. Instead, she inclined her head gracefully when they appeared before her in the kitchen, and she paid them off and thanked them for all they had done for her. They were crying, but she did not cry. The cook and the gardener had served Sadao since he was a little boy in his father's house, and Yumi cried because of the children. She was so grieving that after she had gone, she ran back to Hana. If the baby misses me too much tonight, send for me. I'm going to my own house, and you know where it is. Thank you, Hana, said smiling, but she told herself she would not send for Yumi, however the baby cried. She made the breakfast, and Sadao helped with the children. Neither of them spoke of the servants beyond the fact that they were gone. But after Hana had taken morning food to the prisoner, she came back to Sadao. Why is it we cannot see clearly what we ought to do? She asked him. Even the servants see more clearly than we do. Why are we different from other Japanese? Sadao did not answer. But a little later he went into the room where the prisoner was and said brusquely.
Rascally.
Brusquely means in a, I think earlier we said the word blunt. It means in a very straightforward, not so polite, not so complicated way, brusquely. You know, so if someone says, I'm leaving, we could say they were brusque. Yeah, brusque.
Okay.
You're welcome. Today, you may get up on your feet. I want you to stay up only 5 minutes at a time. Tomorrow, you may try it twice as long. It would be well that you get back your strength as quickly as possible. He saw the flicker of terror on the young face that was still very pale. Okay, the boy murmured. Evidently, he was determined to say more. I feel I ought to thank you, doctor, for having saved my life. Don't thank me too early, Sadao said coldly. He saw the flicker of terror again in the boy's eyes. Terror as unmistakable as an animal's. Like if there's a frightened dog, you know, you can tell that it is frightened. And you don't mistake it. It was unmistakable. It was a kind of animal fear. The scars on his neck were crimson for a moment. Those scars, what were they? What were they? Sadao did not ask. So I think because he's so flustered or feeling uh, excited, the scars have become more red. There's like blood going into his skin. Yeah. When you're flustered, you also sometimes flutter or quiver. So that could be a synonym or a related word as well. But it often has to do with emotion, and maybe your skin will get red or your speaking will uh, become more rapid. You know, oh my god, oh my god, oh god. Someone is flustered. Yeah. Um, but the scars are really disturbing Sadao as they had disturbed Hana. Like maybe the man had been tortured or treated very horribly by the Japanese army. In the afternoon, the second thing happened. Hana, working hard on unaccustomed labor, she was not used to it. She hadn't become narimashita, to cleaning and working because they had servants. Saw a messenger come to the door in official uniform. Her hands went weak, and she could not draw her breath. The servants must have told already. She ran to Sadao, gasping. The same word, Earlier, Tom, we learned his name, but they only said it once, gasped something. Yeah, to breathe out and like so, in a shocked or nervous way. But she gasped, gasping, unable to utter a word. But by then the messenger had simply followed her through the garden, and there he stood. She pointed at him helplessly. Sadao looked up from his book. He was in his office, the other partition of which was thrown open to the garden for the southern sunshine. What is it? He asked the messenger, and then he rose, seeing the man's uniform. You are to come to the palace, the man said. The old general is in pain again. Oh, Hana breathed. Is that all? Do you remember Sadao? He didn't have to go away with the army because the old general liked to have him close because he could help him with his medical conditions. So when the messenger comes, Hana immediately thinks that the servants have betrayed them, had told about them, but maybe the servants have not. The servants, though they are angry, though they are afraid, they maybe also like Sadao and his wife, or don't want him harmed or them harmed. All, the messenger exclaimed, is it not enough? Yeah, so she said, oh, Hana breathed, is that all? Because she was expecting more, something terrible. But the messenger is like, all, the messenger exclaimed, is it not enough? Indeed it is, she replied. I am very sorry. When Sadao came to say goodbye, she was in the kitchen, but doing nothing. The children were asleep, and she sat merely resting for a moment, more exhausted from her fright than from her work. Than from work, sorry. I thought they had come to arrest you, she said. She gazed into his anxious eye. He gazed into her anxious eyes. I must get rid of the man for your sake, he said in distress. So he is dismayed. He is distraught. He is worried because he loves Hana so much, and he doesn't want to see her in pain. And he saw how pained, how emotionally hurt and frightened and confused she has been. Somehow I must get rid of him. Sadao goes to the general. Of course, the general said weakly. I understand fully, but that is because I once took a degree in Princeton. So few Japanese have. Princeton is one of the most famous universities in America. It's like Harvard. Is really like same level, very great old university. So the general has also studied in America. Okay. So he told the general, I care nothing for the man, Excellency, Sadao said, but having operated on him with such success. Yes, yes, the general said. It only makes me feel you more indispensable to me. Evidently you can save anyone. You are so skilled. You say you think I can stand one more such attack as I have had today? Not more than one, Sadao said. So he confessed. I'm very surprised. He told the general the truth. I thought he was going to keep it a secret. Then certainly I can allow nothing to happen to you, the general said with anxiety. His long, pale Japanese face became expressionless, which meant that he was in deep thought. You cannot be arrested, the general said, closing his eyes. Suppose you were condemned to death, and the next day I had to have my operation. So the general is kind of thinking mostly of himself. He needs Sadao because Sadao is kind of a medical genius. He's kind of a genius in his medical knowledge and skill. So the general isn't being cruel about the man. He's saying he understands because he also went to an American university. But yeah, mostly he's concerned about himself, not the American man. And he's afraid if Sadao is taken away and the general needs an operation, he will die. He wants to save his own life. There are other surgeons, Excellency, Sadao suggested. So Sadao's really nice guy. He said, even if I die, there are other surgeons. Maybe a weaker man would say, yeah, you're right, or try to say something to make the general want to keep him alive more. He's very honest. None I trust, the general replied. The best ones have been trained by Germans and would consider the operation successful even if I died. Wow. That's kind of cruel about Germans, maybe. The Germans will say it's a success even if he died.
Wow.
So I guess he trusts American medicine more than German medicine. I don't know why. Okay. I do not care for their point of view, he sighed. It seems a pity that we cannot better combine the German ruthlessness with the American sentimentality. Sentimentality is emotional feelings about things. The state or quality of having an excess of tender feelings, as of love, nostalgia, or compassion. So, where's my...
鑑賞
Kansho?
Oh,
Is that right?
Yeah.
Does that make sense? I don't always trust these definitions, but sometimes it's a little bit helpful. Then you could turn your prisoner over to execution, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. Ah, wow. So then you could turn the prisoner over to execution, and yet I could be sure you would not murder me while I was unconscious. So he thinks if he allows the prisoner to be killed, Sadao might take revenge. I think he's maybe joking, because it said the general laughed. So maybe it's irony. He had an unusual sense of humor. As a Japanese, could you not combine these two foreign elements? He asked. Compassion and ruthlessness. Ruthlessness, I think we came upon that word earlier. It means lack of pity, lack of feeling for people. Yeah. It's kind of an opposite emotion from sentimental. Sentimental is feeling too much. Ruthless is not feeling enough, not caring enough. Yeah. So he's saying, can't you be both? Be ruthless and sentimental. It doesn't, those two emotions do not usually go together. Although they could, like someone who's ruthless about one thing could be sentimental about something else. Yeah. A very famous example is Hitler. Hitler, they say, loved dogs. Yeah, but he was ruthless about and evil about so many other things. So some people can be, I guess, ruthless and sentimental, but they're not very compatible emotions, most people think. And in this case, being sentimental about human life and ruthless about human life, they cannot really coexist. They cannot really go together. Okay. Sadao smiled. I'm not quite sure, he said, but for your sake, I will be willing to try, Excellency. So he, I wonder what the excellent, if this was in Japanese, I wonder what he meant by excellency. This is a very high honorific to say. You usually say it to a king or a very high ranking person. Yeah. Like Osama or something kind of thing, maybe. Yeah. The general shook his head. I had rather not be the test case, he said. He felt suddenly weak and overwhelmed with the cares of his life as an official in times such as these, when repeated victory brought great responsibilities all over the South Pacific. It is very unfortunate that this man should have washed up on your doorstep, he said irritably. So Sadao was irritated to have to deal with the man. Hana was irritated to have to deal with the man. And the general is irritated that Sadao had to deal with the man because it is inconvenient for him. I feel it so myself, Sadao said gently. Yes, we saw this before. He felt the same way. He felt irritable, irritated, unhappy about it. It would be best if he could be quietly killed, the general said. Not by you, but by someone who does not know him. I have my own private assassins. Kawaii.
Assassins.
Assassin is like hitman or professional killer. Yeah. Suppose I send 2 of them to your house tonight, or better, any night. You need not know anything about it. It is now warm. What would be more natural that you should leave the outer partition of the white man's room open in the garden while he sleeps? Certainly it would be very natural, Sadao agreed. In fact, it is so left open every night. Good, the general said, yawning. They are very capable assassins. They are talented. They can do their job. They are trained very well. We could use this word like for a capable surgeon. Yeah.
Mm,
Capable can sometimes just mean good enough, but in this case, it means quite good. They are very capable assassins. They make no noise, and they know the trick, of inward bleeding. I think they are ninja. It sounds like they are ninja.
yeah.
Ninjas, yeah. If you like, I can even have them remove the body. Sadao considered. That perhaps would be best, Excellency, he agreed, thinking of Hana. He left the general's presence then and went home, thinking over the plan. In this way, the whole thing would be taken out of his hands. He would tell Hana nothing, since she would be timid at the idea of assassins in the house. And yet, certainly, such persons were essential in an absolute state such as Japan was. How else could rulers deal with those who opposed them? Wow, he's really interesting because he doesn't sound like the kind of person who could justify or accept assassins, but maybe because of the extreme condition of Japan, he thinks, oh, well, we need this kind of person. You would imagine that someone with the compassion and skill of Sadao would think that assassins were just generally terrible things. It's a very morally ambiguous story. Like ambiguous means unclear. So like, who is the enemy? Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? It is really making us think and challenge ourselves. Yeah. In that way, it's a very good story, I think. He refused to allow anything but reason to be the atmosphere of his mind as he went into the room where the American was in bed. But as he opened the door, to his surprise, he found the young man out of bed and preparing to go into the garden. "What is this?" he exclaimed. The author could have written cried here too. In this case, that type of cry is an exclamation. Yeah. And as you see, he even used an exclamation mark. Who gave you permission to leave your room? I'm not used to waiting for permission, Tom said gaily. He said in a kind of friendly way. Gosh, I feel pretty good again. But will the muscles on this side always feel stiff? Is it so? Sadao inquired, surprised. He forgot all else. Now I thought I had provided against that, he murmured. He thought he had done something to help the stiffness, the katai feeling. And so he's curious scientifically. He thought he had made it so the man wouldn't be stiff on that side. And when the man said he's stiff, he's really curious. Maybe he did something wrong or could do something else. He murmured. He lifted the edge of the man's shirt and gazed at the healing scar. The healing scar. Massage may do it, he said, if exercise does not. So maybe massage, maybe exercise. Are you okay on time, Kasumi?
Okay.
Okay. We have 5 more pages.
Okay.
Yeah. What's this? Quickly?
No, but I'm getting tired.
Okay. Both are okay. We can stop now or we can try to finish the story.
Tomorrow I can't do it, so I won't finish it.
Okay.
today.
Okay, so I'm going to make another video with this story, reading it completely by myself and making notes. So maybe from now on, I'll make less notes. But if you have questions, of course, always just say, hey, Dave, and I will stop. But otherwise, I'll try to read it quickly and with minimal explanations, with just a little bit of explanations. Massage may do it, he said, if exercise does not. It won't bother me much, the young man said. His young face was gaunt. This means very thin and narrow, under the stubbly blonde beard. Say, doctor, I've got something I want to say to you. If I hadn't met a Jap like you, well, I wouldn't be alive today. I know that. Jap is negative word for Japanese people. If someone says it now, it's very insulting. Yeah, it's not a nice word, but he doesn't say it in a bad way. I don't think he has bad thing in his heart. And maybe in those days, just everyone in America called Japanese Jap. But now if you go to America and someone calls you Jap, it's so rude. Yeah. But I don't think he means to be rude. Yeah. And he's thanking him. Yeah. Sadao bowed, but he could not speak. Sure, I know that, Tom went on warmly. His big, thin hands, gripping a chair, were white at the knuckles. I guess if all the Japs were like you, there wouldn't have been a war. Perhaps, Sadao said with difficulty. And now I think you had better go back to bed. He helped the boy back into bed and then bowed. Good night, he said. Sadao slept badly that night. Time and time again he woke, thinking he heard the rustling of footsteps. Rustling is a little bit similar to quivering or shivering or fluttering. He thinks he hears ninja's footsteps. The sound of a twig broken or a stone displaced in the garden. A stone moved out of its place in the garden. A noise such as men might make who carried a burden if they're carrying the dead body away. The next morning he made the excuse to go first into the guest room. If the American were gone, he then could simply tell Hana that so the general had directed. Tell Hana that that was what the general had directed. This is kind of an unusual way. Hana, that's so the general had directed. But when he opened the door, he saw at once that there on the pillow was the shaggy blonde head. He could hear the peaceful breathing of sleep, and he closed the door quietly. He's asleep, he told Hana. He's almost well to sleep like that. What shall we do with him? Hana whispered, her old refrain. It's like a song she keeps singing throughout the story. What should we do? What should we do? What should we do? Her old refrain. Sadao shook his head. I must decide in a day or two, he promised. But certainly, he thought, the second night must be the night. There arose a wind that night, and he listened to the sounds of bending boughs and whistling partitions. Hana woke too. Ought we not to go and close the sick man's partition? She asked. No, Sadao said. He is able now to do it for himself. But the next morning the American was still there. Then the third night, of course, must be the night. The wind changed to quiet rain, and the garden was full of the sound of dripping eaves and running springs. Sadao slept a little better, but he woke at the sound of a crash and leapt to his feet. What was that? Hana cried. The baby woke at her voice and began to wail. I must go and see. But he held her and would not let her move. Sadao, she cried, what is the matter with you? Don't go, he muttered. Don't go. His terror infected her, and she soon stood breathless. So coronavirus is a disease that can infect you. It can go from one person to another. If a disease travels easily, we say it is infectious, an infectious disease, one that can travel. But also with emotion. We sometimes say fear is infectious, and on the opposite side of the coin, laughter is infectious. Yeah, if someone laughs really crazily, or Ryusuke makes a hilarious joke, everyone might start laughing, even if you're not supposed to. It's graduation ceremony. People say, don't laugh, it's serious. One person laughs, it spreads. Yeah. His terror infected her, and she stood breathless, waiting. There was only silence. Together they crept back into the bed, the baby between them. Yet when he opened the door of the guest room in the morning, there was the young man. He was very gay, and had already washed and was now on his feet. He had asked for a razor yesterday, and had shaved himself, and today there was a faint color, in his cheeks. So he's getting stronger, and he now has color in his cheeks. So nowadays, gay means homosexual. Yeah, but the original meaning of gay, and it still exists, though people don't use it much, means happy and cheerful. Yeah. Okay. I am well, he said joyously. Sadao drew his kimono around his weary body. He could not, he decided suddenly, go through another night. It was not that he cared for this young man's life. No, simply it was not worth the strain. You are well, Sadao agreed. He lowered his voice. You are so well that I think I put you in a boat on the shore tonight, with food and extra clothing in it. You might be able to row to that little island not far from the coast. It is so near the coast that it has not been worth fortifying. Fortify means to make strong. So there are no soldiers on this small island, no fort, no military building. Nobody lives on it because in storm, it is submerged. So when there's a storm, the island maybe disappears. So no one lives on it. It is really a very small island. But this is not the season of storm. You could live there until you saw a Korean fishing boat pass by. They pass quite near the island because the water is many fathoms deep there. Fathom is a length of measurement, so it means there's deep water. so maybe they can get lots of fish. The young man stared at him, slowly comprehending. Do I have to? He asked. I think so, Sadao said gently. You understand, it is not hidden that you are here. The young man nodded in perfect comprehension. Okay, he said simply. Sadao did not see him again until evening. As soon as it was dark, he had dragged the stout boat, stout means very strong and sturdy, down to the shore, and in it he put food and bottled water that he had bought secretly during the day, as well as 2 quilts he had bought at a pawn shop. The boat he tied to a post in the water, for the tide was high. There was no moon, and he worked without a flashlight. When he came to the house, he entered as though he were just back from his work, and so Hana knew nothing. Yumi was here today, she said, as she served his supper. Though she was so modern, she still did not eat with him. Maybe in those days, wives did not eat with their husband. Maybe in the past in Japan, a wife would give food to the husband but did not eat while he ate. Is that part of old Japanese culture? Yeah. So she said, even though she was very modern, she studied in America and she could speak English. Even though she was modern, she did not eat with him. She observed older Japanese traditions, maybe. Yumi cried over the baby, she went on with a sigh. She misses him so. The servants will come back as soon as the foreigner is gone, Sadao said. He went into the guest room that night before he went to bed himself and checked carefully the American's temperature, the state of the wound, and his heart and pulse. The pulse was irregular, but that was perhaps because of excitement. The young man's pale lips were pressed together and his eyes burned. Only the scars on his neck were red. I realize you are saving my life again, he told Sadao. Not at all, Sadao said. It is only inconvenient to have you here any longer. He had hesitated a good deal about giving the man a flashlight, but he had decided to give it to him after all. It was a small one, his own, which he used at night when he was called. If your food runs out before you catch a boat, he said, signal me 2 flashes at the same instant the sun drops over the horizon. Do not signal in darkness, for it will be seen. If you are all right but still there, signal me once. You will find fresh fish easily to catch, but you must eat them raw. A fire would be seen. Okay, the young man breathed. He was dressed now in the Japanese clothes which Sadao had given him, and at the last moment Sadao wrapped a black cloth about his blonde head. So he wants to hide the color of his hair. And he wants him to wear Japanese clothes, so maybe people won't notice. Now, Sadao said. The young American, without a word, shook Sadao's hand warmly, and then walked quite well across the floor and down the steps into the darkness of the garden. Once, twice, Sadao saw his light flash to find his way, but that would not be suspected. He waited until, from the shore, there was one more flash. Then he closed the partition. That night he slept. You say the man escaped? The general asked faintly. Oh, so he said it faintly. So you say the man escaped? The general asked faintly. He had been operated upon a week before, an emergency operation to which Sadao had been called in the night. For 12 hours, Sadao had not been sure the general would live. The gallbladder was much involved. That is an organ in the body, gallbladder, a part of an internal organ inside your guts. Then the old man had begun to breathe deeply again and to demand food. Sadao had not been able to ask about the assassins. So far as he knew, they had never come. The servants had returned, and Yumi had cleaned the guest room thoroughly and had burned sulfur in it to get the white man's smell out of it. Nobody said anything. Only the gardener was cross because he had got behind with his chrysanthemums. That is a flower. So he's upset, but he's not upset about the white man anymore. He's upset about the flowers, the gardener. He takes his work very seriously. But after a week, Sadao felt the general was well enough to be spoken to about the prisoner. Yes, Excellency, he escaped, Sadao said. He coughed, signifying that he had not said all he might have said, but was unwilling to disturb the general further. But the old man opened his eyes suddenly. That prisoner, he said, with some energy. Did I not promise you I would kill him for you? You did, Excellency, Sadao said. Well, well, the old man said in a tone of amazement. So I did. But you see, I was suffering a good deal. The truth is, I thought of nothing but myself. In short, I forgot my promise to you. I wondered, Your Excellency, Sadao murmured. It was certainly very careless of me, the general said. But you understand, it was not lack of patriotism or dereliction of duty. A dereliction of duty means not doing it, ignoring your duty. Yeah.
Mm.
He looked anxiously at his doctor. If the matter should come out, you would understand that, wouldn't you? This is interesting. This is so interesting because the servants took power away from Sadao and Hana for a while. And at this moment, the general is admitting that now Sadao might have some power over him. Even though he's a general, someone might ask, what happened to this soldier? And if Sadao says the general promised he would kill him and didn't kill him, the general might be a traitor. The general might be in trouble. So now the general is concerned, even though he's like so high ranking. This is very interesting, this story about status and how status or level in society can change. Who has the power? Certainly, Your Excellency, Sadao said. He suddenly comprehended that the general was in the palm of his hand. The palm of his hand, if someone is in the palm of your hand, it means you control them. Ha ha ha, they are in the palm of my hand. And that as a consequence, he himself was perfectly safe. As a consequence, for that reason, he was perfectly safe. So he was still worried he would be in trouble with the general. But now he realizes the general is worried about him. So he knows he's safe. Yeah. I can swear to your loyalty, Excellency, he said to the old general, and to your zeal against the enemy, your strong emotional fight against the enemy. You are a good man, the general murmured and closed his eyes. You will be rewarded. But Sadao, searching the spot of black in the twilighted sea that night, had his reward. There was no prick of light in the dusk. No one was on the island. His prisoner was gone, safe, doubtless, for he had warned him to wait only for a Korean fishing boat. He stood for a moment on the veranda, gazing out to the sea, where once the young man had come, and that other night. This means from where, but whence is an old form. And it often comes from whence they came, from where he came. Go back to whence you came means go back to where you came from. Yeah. And in his mind, although without reason, there came other white faces he had known. The professor at whose house he had met Hana, a dull man, and his wife had been a silly talkative woman, in spite of her wish to be kind. He remembered his old teacher of anatomy, who had been so insistent on mercy with the knife. And then he remembered the face of his fat and slatternly landlady, fat and sloppy, his landlady did not have good manners and did not have, let me make sure I get the exact definition. It's not a word we use so often. Okay. Slovenly, sloppy, or dowdy. Dowdy means unfashionable and kind of boring in the way they dress. Yeah. Slatternly. It's not a nice thing to say, but he remembers his landlady as that. Okay. And he had had great difficulty in finding a place to live in America because he was Japanese. The Americans were full of prejudice, and it had been bitter to live in it, knowing himself their superior. Oh, wow. So he was bitter because American people were rude and racist to him. And it made him very bitter because he knew he was superior. But he really thinks Japanese people are better. So when he was treated in a poor fashion, it was hard for him to accept. How he had despised the ignorant and dirty old woman who had at last consented to house him in her miserable home. He had once tried to be grateful to her because she had, in his last year, nursed him through influenza. So as I said, nurse can be a verb. So she nursed him through influenza, but it was difficult, for she was no less repulsive to him in her kindness. So he thought she was rude and kimuchi warui when she was being racist and mean, but even when she was nice, he felt like, ugh, she's kind of maybe dirty or not, not neat or, yeah. Now he remembered the youthful, haggard face of his prisoner, white and repulsive. So he found like the skin's so white, like, ugh, kimuchi warui, so white. Strange, he thought. I wonder why I could not kill him. Wow, I think that's the end of it. So there are many questions you can look at home. There are moments in life when we have to make hard choices between our roles as private individuals and as citizens with a sense of national loyalty. Discuss the reference to the story you have just read. So we discussed that a lot. He's really torn between his loyalty to Japan and to the men. Dr. Sadao was compelled by his duty as a doctor to help the enemy soldier. What made Hana, his wife, sympathetic to him in the face of open defiance from the domestic staff? That's a complicated question. We can talk about it next time. How would you explain the reluctance of the soldier to leave the shelter of the doctor's home, even when he knew he couldn't stay there without risk to the doctor and himself? Why was he reluctant? When the doctor said reluctant means not willing to do something or not wanting to do something. So when Sadao said, you must leave tonight, he said, do I have to? Yeah, even though he knew he might die there. What explains the attitude of the general in the matter of the enemy soldier? Was it human consideration, lack of national loyalty, dereliction of duty, or simple self-absorption? I think the answer is self-absorption. He cared most about himself. Earlier, we had the word absorb. A sponge will absorb water. Yeah, the blood could be absorbed into clothing. But self-absorption is only thinking about yourself. Me, 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 me. What do I want? Yeah. So he was thinking about himself more than other things. While hatred against a member of the enemy race is justifiable, especially during wartime, what makes a human being rise above narrow prejudices? I disagree with this question. I don't think hatred of a member of an enemy race is justifiable. I say dame to that. Even if there's war, I am really surprised with that, because that's not written by the author, I don't think. That's written by the person who used this for language learning. So this is many years after, I guess, Pearl S. Boak wrote this, but I disagree with this. Do you think the doctor's final solution to the problem was the best possible one in the circumstances? I think maybe if Dua Sensei uses these questions in her class, I think that she will ask this question. I think this is a very good question. Is this the best possible solution? Were the other solutions offered in the story better? Can you yourself think of a better solution, a better way, to deal with it? Does the story remind you of Birth by A.J. Cronin that you read in Snapshots last year? What are the similarities? This assumes that you have read an earlier story. We have not read this story, so it is not applicable. And is there any film you have seen or novel you have read with a similar theme? That's also a good question. Does this story sound familiar? Does this story, have you ever heard this kind of story before, where there's someone who is really torn between loyalties?
Maybe, but I can't remember.
There is a movie, I haven't watched it, and I should watch it because everyone knows I'm a movie lover, but I'm just afraid it's going to be so sad. I've watched some of it on television. I think I watched some of it on Japanese television. Maybe when I was here the first time. many, many years ago, or definitely it was years ago that I watched it. It's called Schindler's List. Schindler's List. And I know I watched some of it. And I remember the parts that I watched made me so sad. It broke my heart. But it is about a German, I think it's in Germany, factory owner. And Jewish people, Judajin, are being used by slaves by the Germans. And they are being sent to camps and killed. It is a kind of genocide. Genocide is when you don't just kill one person, but you try to kill all people. And in Germany, there was an attempt to kill all Jewish people. Terrible, terrible history. But in that movie, a German factory owner, I think he decides to secretly save people. Even though he was not Jewish, he risked his life to save Jewish people. And maybe we should watch it, or you should ask Dua Sensei to show it to you. Yeah, it won many awards. It's Steven Spielberg, the maker of Jurassic Park and Indiana Jones and E.T., maker of many great movies. Okay, those are Schindler's List. Yeah, yeah. It's a very, very famous movie. And I don't know if this is the little girl. There's a very famous scene that's so sad where like a young, innocent-looking girl is shouting evil things to the Jewish people, like telling them they're so bad because she has been brainwashed. She has been taught that Jewish people are not good. That might be, I know that's a very famous scene, but yeah, you should, if you like dramatic movies, it is a very great movie. And you might know the lead actor. He's now in adventure movies. There's a series of movies called Taken, where he plays a spy, a very great fighter. And I think his daughter is kidnapped. And he fights many people and kills many people. It's like really, almost like John Wick kind of movie. Yeah, kind of, action movie. But he's also a very famous dramatic actor who does very serious roles. And this was a very great role for him. But anyways, we can finish for tonight. I think you worked so hard today. You have done one of your great readings, so I will upload this and you can watch it. I will send everyone the link, but I'll send the link to the whole playlist so you can watch all of our videos if you don't have that playlist already. And as I mentioned, I'll try to make another video reading and discussing it all at once. That will be a long video, but that can help you answer or understand some things that we didn't have time to talk about today. Does that sound good?
Good.
Okay. Arigatou gozaimashita. So have a great day tomorrow. And maybe next week, if you have free time, we can do another one.
Okay.
Okay? So, otsukaresama deshita. I will see you soon.
See you.
Have fun. Kyotsukete with coronavirus. Wash hands. Wash hands. Wash hands. See you soon. Good night. Bye-bye. Bye.